Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Premier Injuries Daily Roundup. Now, we're going to focus on the injuries from game week 28, how they will potentially impact those involved on the internationals during this break. And then we'll also look ahead to the next round of fixtures, which begin on April the 1st. Now, we'll start with my boys, Newcastle United. Of course, they were at the City Ground on Friday night. That was the first game of game week 28. Now, Alan Saint-Maximin, he was replaced at half-time. Eddie Howe confirming that the winger had been struggling with a hamstring problem in the build-up to the game. He's one of several players who had training interrupted in the build-up to that match. He was named in an unchanged starting 11, but didn't look as if he was moving properly, and that's why he was replaced. Now, fingers crossed, he should be okay for game week 29. Elsewhere, we've seen in that unchanged lineup that Nick Pope was between the sticks. He didn't do a lot of training after picking up a knock against Wolverhampton Wanderers the week before the game. They won 2-1, and indeed that injury, which is described as a minor problem, has forced his withdrawal from the England squad. Gareth Southgate calling up Fraser Forster. Hopefully, he will be back and okay for that Manchester United match. Miguel Almiron, many expected him to start at the City Ground. However, he picked up a training ground injury on the eve of that match on the Thursday. That was thigh-related, a quadricep strain. Now, initial reports from South America said that there was expectation it was possibly 2, maybe around 3 weeks for that injury. However, it looks to be a lot more serious than first thought, and it could be late April or early May before the winger is back in contention. So in and around that 6-week period. For Brentford, Matthias Janssen, he was forced off. That was a hip injury. Thomas Frank doesn't expect to be anything long-term, so he should be fine to feature over the international break. For Southampton, a couple of big injury updates there. Bella Kotchap and Jan Bednarek were both sent to hospital for further tests. Bella Kotchap, that was a fairly innocuous challenge. Dislocated his shoulder, and of course this goes back to the problem that he suffered pre-World Cup. Now, ahead of that, the World Cup finals in Qatar, he elected not to go for shoulder surgery. So there's always a risk that there's a potential recurrence or re-injury there. And indeed, that's what happened at the weekend. Now, he's been withdrawn from the Germany squad. He's having a meeting with specialists to determine what the next steps are. If he was to go under the knife, then potentially that could rule his season over. For Bednarek, there were fears that he may have fractured a rib. Now, thankfully, he has joined up with the Poland squad, and after painkilling injections, for now, he's going to remain in place. So it looks, or that suggests that it was just a heavy knock and nothing too serious. Their opponents on the day, we've seen 4 players withdrawn in that opening 45 minutes. The last time that happened in the Premier League was exactly 12 months ago to the day. Richarlison, he was forced off after just 4 minutes, and that looked to be a muscle-related problem. Of course, he's been withdrawn from the Brazil squad as well, and that also casts major doubt on his availability against his former employers in game week 29. Remains to be seen how he responds to treatment, and indeed the extent of that. The striker has been hampered throughout this campaign due to various muscle injuries. And Ben Davies, he was another one. Now, that's a hamstring-related issue. He's also been withdrawn from the Wales squad. And again, there are early doubts over his availability once those Premier League fixtures resume. Now, we're coming at the stage of the season, post-World Cup. It's been heavily congested, where we're picking up a lot of soft tissue and a lot of muscle issues. And Wesley Fofana is another one of those players. Of course, he's just returning from that long stint on the sidelines with that knee problem, that knee ligament injury. I did watch him on Saturday, and he looked very sharp. I was quite impressed. But unfortunately, against Everton, he was withdrawn fairly late on. Now, at the time, Graham Potter felt as if it was just more fatigue-related, possibly a little bit of cramp. He did have that bit of a tenderness in the hamstring. It's been confirmed that there is a problem with that posterior aspect of that thigh that needs to be assessed. It doesn't look to be too serious. It looks as if it was caught. So maybe, that borderline sort of grade 1 tear, and we're hopeful that it may be just around that sort of 10 to 12 days, Marks. And of course, if that's the case and he can get some training on the pitches before game week 29, then potentially that puts him in contention after that. On Sunday, we've seen Crystal Palace face Arsenal. It was already going to be a massive uphill struggle for the Eagles to take anything from the Gunners at the Emirates, but their problems were ramped up even further after Joachim Andersen suffered another calf complaint while warming up in the game. Now, that's his third of the season, having only recently returned in February from a setback that initially kept him on the sidelines for around about a month. So fingers crossed that's not too serious, but we wait to hear a further update to find out the severity of that. Their host on the day, William Saliba and Tomiyasu. For Saliba, we've seen him go off in the opening minutes of that game against Sporting in the Europa League. Now, reports from France suggest that the centre-back could be sidelined for several weeks. However, Mikel Arteta was very coy when asked for an update on Sunday. He will be seeing a specialist on Monday, so maybe expect something either late Monday evening or Tuesday, and we should have a better understanding as to the extent of that problem. For Tomiyasu, I think you'd be very lucky if he plays again this season. That mechanism of injury, that slip, it looked certainly as if there was involvement on that inner medial collateral ligament and potentially some cartilage damage in there as well. Looked fairly severe and certainly one that could keep him on the sidelines for the remainder of this campaign. We've spoke about Gabriel Jesus on several occasions. If you haven't seen the show by Jason McKenna, please do check that out. But we talked about a return to train isn't necessarily a return to play. And then ultimately, what we all want to know is a return to performance. And Mikel Arteta spoke about the management of Gabriel Jesus and his reintegration into the team and slowly getting him back on his feet following knee surgery, following that serious knee setback. Of course, while results are going their way and you have the performances of Leandro Trossard, Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka, where you have all of those players firing, then that makes it an easy decision for Mikel Arteta and he can look to manage that Brazilian a little bit better. And finally, we've seen a game, the FA Cup game at Old Trafford between Manchester United and Fulham. A couple of updates. Rafael Varane was absent from the match day squad. Now, he has retired from international football, so he wasn't going away with his national team. And Erik ten Hag expects the injury to be fairly minor, although he did admit that assessments were still ongoing. So question marks over him potentially ahead of that game with Newcastle. And just to mention that there were a couple of sending off in that game. First and foremost, Willian. That was a handball on the line. That earns him an automatic one-match ban for game week 29. Well, Mitrovic, that was his first sending off for Fulham in 5 years. Didn't take that decision too lightly, pushed the referee. That goes down as violent conduct. That's initially a 3-match ban, but I wouldn't be surprised if that ban was potentially extended. People like Chris Sutton believe that, he should be hit with a longer, much lengthier ban. Some even suggesting up to 10 matches, which would effectively end his season. It remains to be seen. But like I say, because it was the FA Cup, those domestic bans will carry over into the Premier League. So that's it for now. We will be continuing to update throughout this international break and throughout the time as we build up to game week 29. So keep following. You can always check out the table at premierinjuries.com, or you can ask myself or Jason questions via Twitter or in the comments box below.